In the closing days of the Revolutionary War, the Patriot spy network produced a woman named Tabithia Shoemaker. She had led a subset of the Boston area surveillance network known simply as the NEC, and the intelligence her team gathered was invaluable to the American war effort. However, after the siege of Yorktown in 1781, and with the end of the war in sight, Shoemaker's group was disbanded by the larger spy network. Disillusioned and wanting to continue to delve into restricted knowledge, she recruited a small number of NEC spies to join a secret society. Her focus would be on ancient and forgotten knowledge. Happy to continue the camaraderie they had formed during the war, 8 members joined her. At first, their meetings discussed mundane topics, but they were eager to move past the politics of the day. Everything changed in 1785 when Matthias Wallet brought a strange pendant to a meeting, claiming it had spoken to him, revealing information about the pendant's previous owner. Intrigued by the idea, Shoemaker mandated a search for other artifacts exhibiting what she called relance, an unseen impression she believed could remain within physical objects after prolonged contact with human beings or exposure to events with great emotional significance. She believed these objects might allow particularly sensitive individuals to communicate with the dead, learn secret wisdom, or practice what the Knights called distant sight. Over the next decade, this group of 9 began collecting various relics and artifacts. Some were purchased by Shoemaker herself, who had some modicum of wealth, while others were traded or simply stolen. By 1801, the group had grown to 41 members, with a council of 9 remaining in place, including the 6 surviving original members. Shoemaker called herself the Knight Triton, and the council were the Knights of Relance. Its other members were simply called brother or sister. Tabithia Shoemaker, who ran the Knights of Relance, oversaw the building of their headquarters, wrote the society's tenets and charter, and most importantly, handled its considerable finances. The number of artifacts collected over the years had grown substantial and valuable, and Shoemaker regularly bought and sold these items, claiming that once an artifact's relance had been exhausted, it was no longer of any use to the group. Shoemaker died in 1823 and passed leadership of the Knights of Relance to the young Cyrus Wallet, founding member Matthias Wallet's oldest son. Even at 20 years old, his charisma and intensity, having been raised within the inner circle, made his leadership palatable to the membership. Cyrus's focus was on forbidden knowledge, and during the early years of his leadership, he became increasingly convinced that relance was not simply an impression left within an object, but an energy transmitted through an invisible medium connecting consciousness and physical matter. By the 1830s, Cyrus and his followers had begun referring to this proposed medium as the Relantic Ether. Cyrus also became convinced that he was the reincarnation of a 15th century lord from the region that is today Switzerland, and that the Knights of Relance were actually descended from a much older European order founded in 1160. His evidence was unusual but compelling to those already inclined to believe him. During his travels, Cyrus acquired a medieval Swiss sword that he claimed produced unusually powerful relance. The weapon fit in his hand perfectly, and while holding it, he reported memories of places and people he had never encountered. He subsequently traveled to Europe seeking the source of these impressions. While visiting a museum collection, Cyrus encountered a centuries-old portrait of a minor Swiss lord. The resemblance, according to those traveling with him, was remarkable. Cyrus became convinced that the man depicted in the portrait was his previous incarnation and that the sword had once belonged to him. For the Knights of Relance, the sword, the portrait, and Cyrus's experiences provided all the provenance they needed. This new expanded history and Cyrus's claim of reincarnation were accepted by much of the group, whose members soon began seeking evidence of their own previous lives. The original history of the society gradually became intertwined with Cyrus's claim that Shoemaker had not truly founded the Knights at all, but had unknowingly resurrected an organization that had existed centuries earlier. As the 19th century progressed, the Knights continued adapting their understanding of relance to new ideas about science and the supernatural. When spiritualism swept through the United States beginning in the middle of the century, some members saw the movement as validation of beliefs the Knights had held privately for generations. Others dismissed public seances and mediums as crude imitations of practices they believed required relantic artifacts and years of study. By 1871, the Knights of Relance had grown from a regional society to a national one, with chapters in 21 states, including California, and boasted a membership of just over 250 members, many of whom were generational. The 9 Knights were also spread out, with none residing in the same city. This was originally intended to allow them to oversee regional affairs, but over time it loosened their alliances. When Cyrus finally died in 1875, he had managed to transform Shoemaker's small society into one filled with wealthy elites, businessmen, politicians, and even a mysterious financier from Spain. However, Cyrus's death was the beginning of the end. With no succession plan in place and none of the original Knights of Relance still alive, infighting began. Various council members tried to consolidate the wealth and power of the society under their banner. Divisions formed. Some argued over the nature of Relance and the Relantic Ether. Others disputed Cyrus's claims about the medieval origins of the order. Many abandoned the group altogether, realizing that despite decades of collecting artifacts and studying the occult, nothing truly extraordinary had been claimed to have happened within the society in years. By the time a new leader was chosen, it was too little too late. The third and final Knight Triton was a man named Gregory Stokes. Seeing the trajectory of the society and knowing it would soon buckle, he cleaned out the treasury of all liquid assets and fled to Europe. The remaining Knights of Relance excommunicated Gregory, but the damage was done. Out of money, spread thin across the country, and divided into factions that no longer saw eye to eye on much of anything, the society finally disbanded in 1877. There is, however, one rather important detail about the Knights of Relance that I haven't yet mentioned. They never existed. Welcome to Paranormal Possibilities, where we talk about what is possible, what is probable, and what is unlikely. Today, we're pulling back the curtains on secret societies and how such orders rise and fall, and consider the idea that real paranormal experiences fueled interest and membership into such groups. I invented the Knights of Relance for this episode, but I built their history from components that wouldn't have been particularly unusual in the world of secret societies, fraternal organizations, occult movements, and esoteric orders that have existed for centuries. Secret societies formed around charismatic leaders. They developed elaborate doctrines, accumulated wealth and artifacts, attracted prominent members, divided over questions of leadership and belief, and sometimes disappeared just as quickly as they emerged. Where occult-based societies were concerned, the idea of objects containing a psychical energy, or even the memories of those who once owned them, is not a concept unique to the Knights of Relance. Similar ideas have appeared throughout the history of occult belief. Relance and the Relantic Ether, while terms unique to this secret society, resemble concepts that have gone by many names throughout history. And while the Knights of Relance was a society that never was, the story I've told today would have been familiar to anyone who experienced the 19th century occult movement. The Knights of Relance never existed, but almost everything that made them believable did. There have been countless such organizations throughout all of human history, across nearly every society and civilization. You've probably heard of many organizations associated with secrecy, hidden knowledge, or exclusive membership. Rosicrucians, the Knights Templar, the Freemasons, Bohemian Grove, the Skull and Bones Society, and many more. The purpose of this episode isn't to examine any specific group. It's to consider why such groups appeal to us and whether or not genuine supernatural events perpetuate interest in such groups. Not all secret societies have ties to the occult, but there was a large rise in such groups in the 19th century. Seances, farseeing, tarot readings, scrying, and all manner of divination pulled in interested people eager to speak to the dead, experience something unique, or simply belong to a group of like-minded folks. The Knights of Relance are the demonstration model. Many orders started in a similar way, grew in membership and influence, maybe even gained wealth, and then through succession, waning interest in the group's area of focus, and new generations emerging, simply vanish. I want to point out that the people who joined these societies were usually intelligent, educated, and accomplished. Some remained involved for the rest of their lives, which brings me to the question I want to consider for this episode. What if what they experienced was real? In other words, imagine a 35-year-old businessman in New York in 1850. He has a colleague who one day arrives at work wearing a strange lapel pin. He asks his colleague about it, who admits he has joined a fraternal order with a name that isn't familiar to the businessman. The colleague mentions that it is by invitation only, but if there is interest, he'll try to get the businessman an introduction. The businessman goes to a meeting, skeptical but curious. They hold a seance. He doesn't believe in the occult, despite the growing popularity of the topic, until all the candles on the table extinguish at once. A strange glowing mist appears above the table. The businessman hears a voice coming from near the ceiling. Before he knows it, he's a ranking member of the governing body and an important person within this group. This channel always considers paranormal possibilities, and this topic got me wondering, what if the reason these occult-based secret societies grew so quickly in the 19th century was because in many of the cases, the initiates and members were experiencing real supernatural events? There were no doubt con artists, hucksters, and manipulators moving in these circles as well, but that doesn't mean that every floating candle was a parlor trick, or every dancing planchette was just someone manipulating it from out of sight. It is possible that these were real experiences, one that built faith in these groups, and in the end, faith has a lot to do with it. Consider the 3 fictional Knight Drytons from my story. We have the founder, Tabithia, who formed the society in order to cling to the camaraderie she experienced during the war. It's no surprise she invited her unit, her people. Did she really believe in Relance as a concept? It doesn't matter. It was a way to provide the group with a mission and a goal. Then consider Cyrus. He was born into the society, grew up within its walls. For him it was real, and he was the chosen one. He would have believed it wholly. Then we get to Greg, the treasurer turned leader. He saw the writing on the wall and knew how much wealth was left in the diminishing coffers. His faith was in the wealth behind the group, not the mysticism the group practiced. It is possible many such societies, when they get large enough, have many different perspectives and levels of commitment from the members, and paranormal experiences may have helped increase that commitment. Were seances entirely expectation and suggestion? Were apparent psychic experiences coincidence? Did automatic writing originate entirely within the writer's own subconscious? Did people practicing psychometry occasionally produce information they seemingly shouldn't have possessed? Were altered states generated by ritual being interpreted as contact with something external? There's a lot of psychology involved, but psychology doesn't explain every reported experience. In the end, perhaps the most important and paranormally viable secret societies aren't the ones you've heard of. Their names are familiar precisely because their existence is no longer a secret. If a society really had discovered a reliable method of remote viewing, communicating with the dead, or accessing information through means we don't understand, would we know its name? Perhaps somewhere behind an unmarked door, another group still meets. No website, no membership drive, no Wikipedia page. Maybe they're performing rituals handed down for generations. Maybe they're attempting to communicate with the dead. Maybe they're trying to see distant places without ever leaving the room. Maybe the most successful secret society is simply the one that actually managed to remain secret. So now it is your turn. Tell me in the comments. Do you think genuine paranormal experiences fueled interest in secret societies, leading to their dramatic rise in the 1800s? Please like and subscribe if this video was of interest. My channel is still reading the tea leaves on YouTube, and I'm looking forward to growing it with you. And remember, the possibilities are endless.